Hey everybody, this is Faith and Cameron from the Panic Podcast.
Welcome to this special episode of the podcast where we'll be interviewing Faith about her OCD.
Heyo!
We are here with Faith Lozon Collins for a very special interview today. It's kind of interesting because we're going to be covering some of the topics that we're going to be covering in our second episode of the podcast.
Right.
So, thanks for being on the show today, Faith.
Anytime, Cameron, anytime.
All right, so I'm going to start off with this first question.
Okay.
Tell me about, or it's more like it's not really a question, but tell me about your earliest memory of OCD.
Well, I grew up with my single mother, and she actually had, or is still dealing with, a sort of minor case of OCD. So, you know how you watch your parents and you sort of take on their habits? I think that's probably how it started, was I would see some sort of OCD thing that she would do, and I would just start doing it and taking it as normal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a perfectionist, and I was always that way as a kid, so I had to do things a certain way and make them perfect. And then in order to add order to my life, I would obsess about things and have them in a certain order, and that would make me feel comfortable and make me feel organized in my head. So even when I was in like grade 2, in my agenda for goals, I would write down what I had to do. I would rate them according to importance, and then I would try and get to that number and do my everyday activities according to following this specific mode. It was, I was always doing these little things in order to make myself feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And you stated earlier that you saw this as kind of something normal. Like you saw your mother doing it and it was kind of just a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Was there kind of a point where you realized that maybe this wasn't something that was normal?
Yeah, well, I guess one of my OCDs early on was just the way that I would open up a can of pop. I would tap it a certain number, and like, especially with my mother, she was always very specific with numbers. Only certain numbers were good, or she would only take food in increments of 2. So if you offered her a bag of chips, she would take 2 chips, and she could not have 1 chip. And so I even took on that 2 sort of number thing with even numbers. I liked 24, I liked 48, 12. So when I started opening a can of pop, I would tap it 24 times with each finger and then go around the can with my thumb 48 times. And then I was safe to open this can. And obviously I noticed that isn't normal when everybody else is just opening their cans.
Right, yeah. Was there sort of a way that you dealt with this kind of OCD?
Yeah. Well, it was, some of it was, I would try and hide this stuff, right? So if I was in a social event and I'm tapping, I would try and hide it from people so they wouldn't see, or maybe talk to them and they wouldn't notice what was going on with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I would, I'd be stirring things a certain amount clockwise and then counterclockwise, and I just, it was hard to deal with because it felt right. Doing that gave you that sense of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had this praying OCD issue where I would list off people to pray for in a specific order, and then I would add people as I went through my life. I would add more people to this list, and my list got so extensive that I would write this list down on lined piece of paper, and I ended up having 2 pages front and back of those small school note lines. So you can imagine how many people and how many things I was praying for at this point. And I would have to take this paper and read it off. And I guess some of the ways of dealing with it, honestly, is just growing up. I grew out of certain things. I started trying to wean myself off. I wouldn't open cans for myself if that's a way of dealing with it. I would just give it to somebody else and say, open my can, because it's going to take me too long. Later on in life, I mean, I had this dream box with layers and tallies, and I would have to bring it everywhere, and I was calling my mother if I had forgotten it and making her do this planned thing that I do. I didn't think I was ever going to stop doing that. I thought I was always going to be doing this obsessive thing, and my stepmother even once said, when are you going to stop? When are you going to stop planning that? That's stupid. When are you going to stop? You're obsessive. Like, asking me as if I know when I'm going to stop. It just sort of, I just grew as a person. Maybe it was medication a little bit. Maybe it was counseling a little bit, honestly.
Would you say you're still in sort of a transitional period?
Yes, I am in a transitional period. Like, in regards to that sort of boxing that I was telling you about, I still tally these things that I do. I still add these tallies, and I still plan it and use these layered, it's this whole complex thing. So I still do it, but now I don't do it every night, whereas I used to have to, and I couldn't miss a day, and I had to keep count. So it's a growing process. It's a change. Of course, like, the difficult thing is that new little compulsions can always start. And, you know, they have. And I used to have to follow a list of everything I have to do before I go to bed. And I still follow that list. And I won't be able to go to sleep unless that happens. And new things are always going to come up. And I think with somebody with OCD, it's almost inevitable, because your brain is wired to think that this sort of repetition or organization is the only thing that's going to calm down an anxiety sort of feeling.
You said before that you went to counseling, that you saw someone. What was your experience like with that?
Well, it's still ongoing. I started seeing a counselor when I was in grade 2, and I've been seeing various versions of counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, things like that since then. So the experience these people have grown with me throughout my life. I've had different people, but I've gotten used to talking about issues of mental health honestly and bluntly. So it's really helped in that way. I can be honest with these people, and then I can go out and be honest with my friends and my family in real life about these issues. And then you find out that way that, you know, your friends and your family, they have similar issues. They just weren't going to talk about it before. So in that way, counseling's helped me a lot. And of course, I was in cognitive behavioral therapy, which works to change the way your mind thinks, which changes your thought process. And of course, that's exactly what my anxiety was leading me to, my obsessive compulsive tendencies. It was all about a thought process and all about this train of thought that leads to a panic attack or leads to, you know, anxiety in a strong way. So that cognitive behavioral therapy really helped with certain compulsions in my life. I sort of made a plan on how to go about thinking differently about them.
So as someone who's gone through that, who has gone, you know, to professionals for help, would you recommend that to someone who has like a very severe case of OCD to help them? Would you recommend that form of treatment?
I do recommend counseling. I mean, I know some people are weary of it. or think there's a stigma against it. And I know that counseling isn't for everybody. It definitely is a process of getting comfortable with talking to someone about that sort of thing. And maybe talking to friends and family helps, but I personally like being able to talk to somebody from a different objective point than an immediate member of my family. There's something nice about somebody that can offer you a different view, who doesn't know you as well as everybody else. So I do recommend it. I recommend it for all ages, really. I think it's okay to see a counselor at any age. Severe cases of OCD, these people may even be obsessively, compulsively nervous about talking to somebody like that. Like, even that may freak them out and give them anxiety. So that's what I mean by it's not for everybody. It's something you have to tread on carefully. But I think it is worth a try at least once, just to test it out, see how you feel about it. You don't have to continue anything you don't want to do, right? So that's what I sort of suggest.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say to people, listeners, who have OCD on a daily basis? Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, we all have different cases of obsessive compulsive disorder and all different weaknesses and strengths to it. We're all individuals, so I suggest trying to get comfortable in talking about it, even if you think you're strange for that reason or weird. A lot of people actually have dealt with this sort of thing, so I think just being able to talk to a friend or a counselor, whatever, to talk about it really helps. And honestly, if it makes you feel okay in that moment and it's not a harmful thing, such as tapping on that pop can, I honestly think it's not going to hurt anybody. And it's just the way you are. And if it's going to make you feel okay a minute later, then you know what, it's fine. As long as it's like not some violent act, I think we shouldn't think of it as, we shouldn't look at these people and deem them, wrong or deem them damaged. It's just something they do, and you just have to accept it. Like, I'll give my mom 2 pieces of the apple instead of 1, and that's okay.
Thanks for joining us on this special episode of the Panic Podcast.
Thanks for talking with me, Cameron. That was fun.
Yep, and until next time,
inhale, exhale, and
panic.
panic.